Yep. Hello everyone. Welcome to today's videos on PMBOK 7 series. Today we're going to talk about project uncertainty performance domain. So far in my previous videos we already discussed all the other project performance domain like stakeholders, team, planning, project work, delivery and measurement, right? So today is the last topic on project performance domain, which is uncertainty. So let's look at understand what we mean by uncertainty performance domain. What does it address? It addresses activities and functions associated with risk and uncertainty. As simple as that, right? So we are going to deal with the activities and functions which are related to risk and uncertainty. What are my desired outcomes to ensure the effective execution of this uncertainty performance domain? Right? So team should have an awareness of the environment, right? About the technical environment, social environment, political environment, the market and economical environment. So every stakeholders are in particular the project manager or a project leader who should have the reasonable awareness, understanding of the environment that the project is being getting operated. Right? It can be a technological environment, a social things, a political things, market conditions, and macroeconomic and microeconomic environments. Right? So teams should have that awareness of that. On what conditions the project is getting operated, right? The second desired outcome is proactively exploring and responding to uncertainty. How proactively you can explore and respond to the uncertainty. So you need to have a risk, awareness and a way of mechanisms of identifying a risk and categorizing it. You need to have a risk response with you, right? And team should have an awareness of the independence of multiple variables of the project. So what are the different variables of the project that is going, dependent as well and interdependent as well, right? So that's very important, right? So how the system thinking, right? You need to have a system thinking. The capacity to anticipate threats and opportunities and understand the consequences of issues. The project manager or the request stakeholders should have the capacity to understand and anticipate the threats and opportunities and understand the consequence of that. And the project delivery with little or no negative impact from unseen events, unforeseen events and conditions. Right? How resilient, it's not even resilient, how proactive you are to anticipate uncertain events and what is your planned responses to have, almost nil impact, right? The final two outcomes, desired outcomes are opportunities are realized to improve the project performance and the effective use of the cost and schedule reserves, right? Your management reserves and contingency reserves need to be used very diligently, very minimally. You need to use effectively. And these are the desired outcomes of uncertainty performance domain. So let's understand few key terms which we are going to deal with in this particular domain. The uncertainty, a lack of understanding and awareness of issues. Right? You may not have a complete understanding. There may be a lot of unknown areas for the technology we're entering into that, right? So that will be, that ambiguity or uncertainty will get cleared, when you progressively, when you progress further, right? The next item is an ambiguity, a state of being unclear, right? You don't have, most of the things are very unclear for you. So only when you progressively elaborate, you will get more clarity, right? So if you look at that, epics might have little bit ambiguous compared to stories. So stories will have a clear cut information which has a definition of ready and definition of done within it, right? So the epics are not as clear as stories. So epics has a little bit of ambiguity, so you need to do the groomings and everything, right? So that's where, to remove the ambiguity, the sprint planning and grooming session helps. Complexity, the characteristics of, you know uh, program or project and its environment that is difficult to manage due to human behavior, system behavior, and ambiguity, right? So most of the complexities are created by human behaviors and systemic things, system behavior, right? Volatility, the possibility of rapid and unpredictable change, right? The volatility of the market price of a particular share price, how volatile it is, right? Your raw material price, the commodity price like steel, right? Something like that, highly volatile. The volatility of raw material, cost is, you need to understand, it is giving a little more risk to you, and you need to understand the volatility, right? You need to understand, you need to have that risk response for volatility, right? So what is the risk? Risk is an uncertain event or a condition which has a positive or a negative effect when it occurs, right? So let's understand some of the aspects of uncertainty before we get into the functions and attributes or activities in this domain. What are the aspects of uncertainty, right? So economic factors such as volatility in prices, availability of resources, ability to borrow funds, inflation and deflation, right? This is kind of macroeconomical factors. So technical considerations such as new or emerging technology, complexity are associated with the systems and interfaces. The legal or legislative constraints are requirements, right? So your regulatory constraints, your government regulations, your standards, safety standards, cyber security standards, all these coming into the giving the aspect of uncertainty, right? A new policy, a new consumer law will give some kind of uncertainty. The physical environment as it pertains to the safety, weather, and working condition, right? So you are prone to natural calamities, right? The ambiguity associated with the current and future conditions. The social and market influence is shaped by the opinion and media, right? So the political influence is either external or internal to the organizations. All these are aspects of fraternity. These are the ways in which you can anticipate uncertainty, right? So let's get into the functions and activities in uncertainty domain, right? What are the options to respond to general uncertainty? So you need to gather information. You need to have a right set of information. You need to have a data, various set of information from your newspapers, your websites, your different forums. Like you can gather the information and prepare for multiple outcomes, right? You can use a set-based design. You can have multiple design options, and based on your constraints and availability of resources and time and cost, you can choose the best design for the execution of that particular project in that domain. Build in resilience, right? How to build resilience when you fail. What sort of activities and functions, or what sort of readiness you need to have in terms of failure. Building a warranty system or building safety system, and all these things are options to respond, right? Let's discuss about ambiguity and complexity. There are two types of ambiguity: conceptual ambiguity. Complex ambiguity is nothing but the ambiguity that is creating your understanding. So same word will give a different understanding when you put it in different context, right? That's called conceptual ambiguity. Situational ambiguity, that is ambiguity created because of certain situations, How do we respond to that? How do we clear up the situational ambiguity, right? So when you start up the project, you may have a lot of ambiguity in terms of business outcomes or probability of success, right? In terms of there may be a lot of unknown areas, a lot of ambiguous areas, certain areas you may not even exposed to that, right? So how we can avoid that? We can use the progressive elaboration as a technique, right? So as you progress, you can elaborate your scope, you can funnel down the operation structure, you get more clarity, right? You can use more prototypes to understand the multiple outcomes, see that how the variables react to each other. So prototypes will help you understand, reduce the risk of uncertainty. It helps you to reduce the ambiguity. And experiments, building minimum viable products. Right? You can use the design thinking and lean startup. You can do the experiment very quickly, and then create an MVP and go with the actual product development. So that's how ambiguity is being addressed. Complexity, right? A lot of complexities we can uh, discuss. System-based complexities, decoupling, right? So you can use the decoupling method. Try to decouple the variables of the product and see that how independent it is, it works. So only when you decouple certain variables, you understand how individually that particular variable affects that overall outcome. Then based on that, you can define the complexity of it. Simulation, right? If car safety mechanism, right? You try to simulate that test of collapsing the car. That help you understand the damage, the quantity of anticipated damage and what kind of airbags you need to have. You need to simulate that. The second aspect is reframing. The diversity and balance is the concepts in reframing the complexities. You need to have a diverse ideas from diverse people, right? So try to understand, try to get ideas from different people, different domain people, to reduce the complexity. To reduce unknown areas of certain areas which you don't know, right? You can get experts, you can get diverse opinions, so that a mix of people, experienced people, will help you to understand the diverse thought. That reduce the risk, that reduce the complexity for your work. So you need to balance that, balancing your work in terms of balancing your triple constraints. How do reducing the complexity by increasing the budget, or balancing your scope, reduce the scope to reduce the complexities, right? So you can do the process based activities to reduce the complexity, right? You can go with iterations. So when you go in a small iteration, you can reduce the complexity, right? Because every iteration you are getting some feedback from the customer or product people, understand that the direction of the product roadmap, and you can engage your peoples in a rightly manner. You can engage the right set of people, right skill set, engage them at the right time, so that you'll reduce the complexities. And fail safe, understanding critical component failure. So you need to validate that, you need to simulate if certain critical component fails, what is the redundancy mechanism we have uh, in our product, right? So when the car is uh, getting into an accident, how is that airbags or safeguarding your lives? So you need to understand that, simulate certain aspects of fail-safe activities. It's a kind of a process-based method of addressing the complexities. Volatility. How I can remove the volatilities, or how I can reduce the impact of the volatility. Go with alternative analysis. Try with different options. Go for different alternative options. right? You can alternatively decide, whether to import, or you can, you know, from different countries, or whether you're going to use the existing, local raw materials. So you can have alternative options and analysis that, how we can reduce the volatility, and using the right use of reserves like contingency reserves and management reserves to reduce the volatility. So you need to effectively use the reserves, right? So if you understand the range of volatility, and you can keep adequate reserve at both at project level and management level, right? Let's understand the next function, which is the risk. What is the overall project risk? Overall project risk is the effect of uncertainty on the project as a whole, arising from the all sources of uncertainty. So the project manager, should have the capability of identifying the risks from various sources, from technology, from environment, right, macroeconomical, political, right? So all those things, we should have a mechanism or a method of checking the risk. Sourcing the risks, both positive and negative, right? So overall risk is often a function of complexity, ambiguity, and volatility, right? The responses to the overall project risk are same as for the individual threats and opportunities. If the overall risk up on the project is too high, the organization may choose to cancel the project. Right? You don't want to lose the money. You don't want the money you invested. You don't want to lose it, right? So let's get into the next function, which is threats. How I'm going to handle the threat. So threat is the negative aspect of your risks. Right? The risk has two aspects. One is this can come as an opportunity, this can come as a threat. How do I avoid a threat? Negative impact. The risk has, which is a negative impact, is called threat to the project. I can avoid. These are the risk responses for threats. I can avoid that risk by not doing this project, not investing money on certain areas of diversification I'm looking at. Escalating, right? Certain threats beyond the control of project manager. And project sponsor will understand that's beyond the scope of the project, and the feasibility is not work out, then we'll simply escalate and move ahead with the current setup. Transfer the risk, transfer the threat. Insurance is one example of transferring. Outsourcing is one example of transferring. You can transfer, non-core activities to the suppliers or vendors. You can transfer your risk of uncertainty to an insurer, right? Something like a fire, or natural calamities. You can take insurance, right? You can transfer the risk, the amount of damage. At least you can transfer certain percentage of damage to them. Mitigating the threat, you can mitigate, by using a right set of strategies, response mechanism. You can try to mitigate the threat, right? And accepting it, right? If certain things may not be in our control, you have to just accept it and observe that, damage, and take appropriate actions. So this is the picture talks about the risk reduction over the period of time. So if you look at that, there are 5 risks being identified. How is getting tracked from month on month? How is that risk reduction is happening over the time? Right? If you look at this diagram, there's risk on pump capacity is, it's not reduced, but other risks are, reasonably reduced with your mitigation and, other strategies. Next, let's look at the opportunities. Opportunities is a positive portion of your risk. So when there is an opportunity comes, we can have these many responses. You try to exploit that opportunity, right? So If certain countries are newly coming out in a EV electric vehicle policy, try to exploit of export opportunities, right? If you're starting in Europe, try to utilize the entire European Union governance setup and exploiting it, escalating the opportunity where this particular aspect is not beyond the scope of the project and beyond the capacity of the project manager. So they can use a different mechanism to avail that opportunity, right? You can share the opportunities, right, by merging, taking, acquiring the company, right? You can share that opportunities, right? You can enhance an opportunity, you can accept an opportunity, right? How I can enhance it? Look at the market condition. How we can increase the, if there is an opportunity to increase the market share due to some laws and policy changes, you try to enhance that. Try to enhance your capacity, unutilized capacity, just enhance and use the opportunity. Right? Accepting the opportunities, when there is more orders coming, just accept, right? And then go ahead and use that unutilized capacity and try to subcontract and then manage that, right? And deliver it, right? So far we discussed about the functions and activities related to the domain, this particular uncertainty domain. So let's look at how do we check our desired outcomes, right? So first outcome we discussed was the awareness of environment. A project manager should have awareness of different environments like technical, social. A team member should aware of it. So how do I check that awareness? So the incorporation of environmental consideration, right, while evaluating the uncertainty, risk, and responses. You need to have a right mechanism of evaluating risk, sourcing the risk. Project manager should avail that information from the quality management system or any other risk system or any other enterprise risk repository, and they should be able to figure out an appropriate responses for each risk and proactively exploring and responding to uncertainty, right? The risk response are aligned with the prioritization of the project constraints, right? Such as budget, schedule, and performance constraints. So risk response should be aligned with that. Awareness of interdependence of multiple variables on the project. So actions to address the complexity, ambiguity, and volatility are appropriate to the project. Are you taking the right set of actions to address that complexity and ambiguity? Right, we have studied a lot of actions like set-based design. We talked about using reserves, right? This sort of actions you need to use appropriately for the project. You need to have a system for identifying and capturing and responding to the risk are appropriately robust. You need to have a right system, right project management tool, right set of risk repository, right, to identify and capturing. You need to have a database of previous similar projects to understand what are the similar risks, what are the consequences of those risks, and capture, utilize that knowledge and current project as well, right? And using the variance threshold as to minimize your negative impact, right? Have the control limits for your schedule and budget and be within that for every stage and every activity. Teams should use the established mechanism to identify and leverage opportunities, right? So your database, risk-based database should give the information to our project managers and teams to establish, to identify the opportunities. Right? Teams should take steps to proactively prevent the threats, thereby limiting use of cost and schedule reserve. Right? So you need to have an established mechanism for preventing threats, right mechanism for mitigating risks which are negative in nature, so that you can bring down the cost and schedule usage of cost and schedule reserve. These are the ways and means in which we can check the desired outcomes. Right. So with that, we come to a conclusion of the project performance domains in its entirety. Right? We completed all the different domains we discussed. Please share your comments. What are the specific areas you want to cover in all these project performance domain? You want to cover certain specific aspect like earned value analysis, or any other mechanisms of risk response. I'll be happy to produce required set of videos. Okay, so I'm looking for your comments and feedback for this particular series of PMBOK. I'll be happy to address your thoughts. Okay, so thanks for listening. Okay, will you? I will see you with next set of videos. Okay, thank you so much. Bye bye.